Okay. So about the agenda for today and what we will be talking about. So this session really focuses on the narrative and the budget template of the cooperation grants. We already had an info session in November discussing more in depth what the program is about and what the cooperation grants are about, including the eligibility criteria. If you want to have more information on this, I really encourage you to watch the recording that is available on the program's website, as well as the slides. We also have an extensive FAQ section and a lot of information available on the website in general. So today we will really focus on the narrative and budget template, and so what to focus on, what to pay attention to, what not to do, how to apply, basically. And then this will be followed by a Q&A session. So a reminder on what is the AU EU Youth Action Lab program. So AU stands for African Union, EU for European Union, and Youth Action Lab is the name of the program. It's a joint initiative from the African Union and the European Union. It's a 4-year program that aims to empower youth and strengthen their involvement in active, meaningful, and innovative ways. And it's doing so by giving grants that range from 5,000 to 50,000 euros to youth-led organizations. This program is implemented by 3 organizations that are Oxfam, Restless Development, and the European Youth Forum. And each of the implementing organizations are responsible for a specific type
Mais
of...
pour les enfants aussi. Alors que là, pour les enfants, enfin, on a interaction pour les enfants, mais pour les autres programmes, c'est pas.
So, thank you. So each grant type is led by is implemented by a specific consortium partner. So between Oxfam Versus Development and the European Youth Forum. So there are innovation grants that really aim for youth to be able to test, to design new initiatives, new innovations that tackle global challenges. And the grants range from 30,000 to 40,000 euros. Oxfam is also implementing entrepreneurship grants that really focuses on employment amongst youth and entrepreneurship opportunities, and those grants are of 50,000 euros. Restless Development is implementing representation grants, so that really focus on marginalized youth. So for marginalized youth to do advocacy, to raise their voice and amplify their voice at various levels. The grants range from 5,000 to 20,000 euros. Those 3 grant types are available in 12 African countries. The deadline has passed now. It was beginning of January. And then we have the cooperation grants. So the cooperation grants are what you're here for today. These are implemented by the European Youth Forum, and they really aim for African and European youth to work on joint policy and advocacy initiatives. And the grants are of 50,000 euros. And at the heart of the program, there is the Youth Advisory Board, which is composed of African and European youth representatives. They're really at the heart of the program, so they are really co-creating, designing the program, and also actively involved in the reviewing of the applications. A bit more on what are cooperation grants exactly. So the overall objective of cooperation grants is really to support cooperation initiatives that advocate for young people's rights and priorities at cross-continental and continental levels. And then if you have a cooperation grant, you can expect 3 main things. The first one is financial support. So that's the 50,000 euros to help the initiatives, so to help advocating for, to help young people advocate for their rights. The program doesn't only offer financial support, it also has a big emphasis on capacity building, capacity development of the selected organizations. So we'll be offering a lot of training and resources. For instance, there will be 2 in-person trainings that will be offered. for cooperation grantees and also for all the organizations that are benefiting, that are part of the program. And you will also have to budget 5% of your own budget towards capacity building of your organization. And we'll discuss this a bit later. And then a third main aspect is intercultural dialogue and cross-continental collaboration. So this is really the partnerships that are created between African and European organizations within a consortium, but not only, because you will also be touched and really connect with organizations outside of your consortium, but all organizations that are part of the program. And a bit more details on the grant. So now the deadline is the 12th of February. You may expect it to have to be contacted by April or May. And then the second cycle, so the cycle now, so your grant period should last from May or June 2026 until April or May 2027. So for a period of 12 months, we will be allocating 10 grants. Each grant is of 50,000 euros, and each consortium can have 2 to 4 organizations with at least 1 African and 1 European organization per consortium. So for cooperation grants, there are 4 main focus areas that will also need to be reflected in the narrative application template. So one of them is policy and advocacy. So your projects should really have a clear policy and advocacy focus. So work on current policy processes, current policies that you want to influence. And by advocacy, we mean speaking up for a cause in order to create change. So this is what we wrote. This is also in the funding manual and on the website. Initiatives should actively engage in efforts to influence public policies, government and community decisions, and societal attitudes to promote positive changes for youth, especially marginalized youth at local, national, or international level. Another important aspect is cross-continental collaboration, which is really at the heart of the program. And this is regarding 2 things. The first one is cross-continental challenges, in the sense that the topic you decide to work on should be relevant for all organizations that are part of the consortium. So it should be relevant in all implementing countries. This means that, for example, if you work on a project that has a focus on influencing policies related to climate, for example, the focus of your project should, and you have one organization based, for example, one is based in Spain and another one is based in Uganda. You really need to have a topic that is important, that is relevant for all organizations that are part of the consortium, and that is relevant in both Spain and Uganda. So this is really important. The challenges or the topic you want to work on should be relevant for all participating organizations. And then the collaboration itself should be beneficial for the project and all organizations that are part of the consortium. So this is also something you will have to demonstrate in your application. You'll have to show why this cross-continental collaboration is an added value for the project itself. So in terms of your policy and advocacy goals, but also in terms of exchanging knowledge within the consortium and for the different organizations. And then marginalized groups. So this means that one of the focus areas of your application, your project will also have to benefit marginalized groups. By marginalized youth, we mean youth who face exclusion because of the mix of their identity, socioeconomic background, location, and other factors. This is also something that you will have to demonstrate in your application. So why these groups are marginalized in this specific context. And so your initiative will have to benefit marginalized groups. And also important to note is that initiatives that are led by marginalized groups will be prioritized. In practice, this means that if 2 applications have a similar score or the same score, if one of them is led by organizations that are led by marginalized groups, this application will be prioritized over the other one. And then sustainability, so the continuity of the project, but also of the partnership after the grant period. So these are really the 4 focus areas that will have to be reflected within your application. For the eligibility criteria, I won't go in depth because this was discussed in November. You can also find way more info on the website, but this is not going to be discussed today. But just a reminder of the countries that are eligible. So there are 12 African focus countries, which are Ethiopia, Kenya, Mozambique, Nigeria, Senegal, Sierra Leone, Somalia and Somaliland, Tanzania, Tunisia, Uganda, Zambia, and Zimbabwe, and European Union member states. And then just regarding the youth-led criteria, so this is a program that aims to empower youth-led initiatives. So all organizations that apply to this grant need to be youth-led. There is more information on the website on what this means, what is expected. So I really invite you to scan the QR code and to have a look at the website after the webinar if you haven't done so yet. And we can go to the next slide. Thank you. So now we will go into the narrative application template. So the first thing you'll have to do once you go through the documentation, through the website, is to get the registration link from the AU-EU Youth Action Lab Cooperation Grants webpage. This presentation will be shared on the website after this session. So you'll also be able to find all information there. So once you get the registration link, so you'll have to create an account on the ONGRIP platform, which is the official platform through which you will have to submit your application. We also have an explanatory video on the website and also a webpage that includes all of the steps on how to do this. So I'll also not go into this because everything is available on the website. Also important to remind that you can submit 1 application per organization. And this is the case whether you apply as a coordinator or a collaborator. So within your consortium, 1 organization will take the role of coordinator and others will be collaborators. And whether you apply as a coordinator or a collaborator, you can only submit 1 application. If you submit more than 1 application, only the first one will be taken into consideration. So really pay attention to this. You can only submit your application online through the portal. We received several emails with applications. We cannot review them through email. So they really need to be submitted through the portals. This is to ensure transparency and fairness. And now I'll share my screen and I'll show you how the Cooperation Grants Narrative application template works. So once you are on the website, so just to go back on the website, this is the home page. And then you have different tabs, so you can read more about the program, about the Youth Action Lab, see who are the Youth Advisory Board members, and then you have a tab with grants, and you're interested in cooperation grants. So once you click on cooperation grants, you have some information about what cooperation grants are, about what you can expect, about the eligibility criteria, the kind of activities you can propose, and so on. And then you have a guide on how to apply. So first, really important to go through the funding manual because all the information you need will be there. You also have the official budget template that is here. You have a sample application, which you can see. So this is to allow you to see the questions before registering to the platform to see if this is something that you're interested in. The deadline, important to remember, 12 February 2026 at 1 p.m. Central European time, and then here you can apply. So this is the way for you to register. Once you register, you'll receive a confirmation email with your credentials, and then you'll get access to the OEncrypt platform, which looks like this. You'll have to go on My Applications. Click, so here you have name and then your application, and then you have the details section, but this is not very important. You have to go to narrative, and then you'll have access to the narrative application template. So you have different questions. At first, so you'll have to upload different documentation that are mandatory, so your registration documents and others. And then a few important points. You'll see that for many questions, you have a little I next to the question. I stands for information. It will give you more information on the question. So either it will tell you the character count limit, which is important to consider, or you'll get more information on the question itself. Sometimes you'll get some guiding questions on this. And if you want, you can also download the application template as a Word document first, if you want to just work on this on Word, and then and then type it in, like copy paste the answers on the application template, and then submit your application. In principle, all the answers you write should be saved. So you shouldn't have to do it at once, but you never know. Like in principle, it should be saved, but just to be sure, you can also use another Word document, write your answers there, and then go back to the application template, copy paste them on the template, and then submit. So the first one is really just about information regarding your organization. And then you can add, so you can be 2 to 4 collaborators. So then on the second page, you have more information about the project itself. So for this, so you can write the title, acronym if you have one, and then a summary. So for the summary of your project, it's really for us to understand what the project is about. So what it is about, where it will take place, so the different countries that are involved in the project, who is involved in the project, and important to note that this overview might be published online if we select your application. So by reading your project summary, we should really understand what the project is about, but it's a summary, so you don't have to go really detailed, but give like a concise overview of what your project will be about during those 12 months and how it relates to the objectives and to the focus areas of the grant. And then we go into the description of the project, and this really relates to the focus areas that I was showing and explaining before. So policy and advocacy, cross-continental collaboration, marginalized youth, and sustainability. So the first question is really asking, so what is the problem that you identified? So why are you actually working on this issue? Why is it relevant? Why is there something that you want to change on this issue? So that's the problem statement and the main issue your project your consortium wants to work on, and also how it is relevant in all the countries that are implementing the project. So how does this look like in all the countries that you're working in, and how it affects the communities that you work with. And then we have a question on the objectives, on the goals of the project, and what impact you expect to have. Also important to know, this is also included in the little info part, so here with the I. So we are aware that policy and advocacy changes take time, so we're not expecting to have huge policy changes within a year and with this budget. We really want to understand like what impact you are expecting to have within those 12 months, or also after those 12 months, if there is some continuity of the project. So also important not to overpromise in this section. And then the next question really focuses, so that's the cross-continental collaboration focus area that I showed earlier. So really showing how all of the organizations that are participating here will benefit from the cooperation. So what expertise, knowledge, focus areas, strength are you exchanging between the different organizations? So how are you going to work together? This is also somewhere where you can, for example, include some potential power dynamics that there might be in the consortium. So this is really to show how you'll work between the different organizations. So how is this really a cross-continental collaboration and not one organization leading others, but really a cooperation between different organizations. And then we have a question on how your project will benefit marginalized youth and how they will be involved in the project. So here we're asking you, so that's what I was explaining before. So you will have to explain how they are marginalized in your context and how your project will benefit marginalized youth. And then we have two questions regarding sustainability or continuity of the project. So the first one is regarding the project itself, so your policy and your advocacy goals. So how is your project going to live after the end of the grant period? And then the other question is really related to the partnership and the capacity building of the organization. So how is this partnership continuing after the project? So these are the questions. So really to describe what your project is about, and this really relates to the focus areas of the grant. So I really encourage you to have a look and to read the funding manual, because this is explained. This is explained more in depth in the funding manual. So I really invite you to read the funding manual. And then we have a next part, a next section, which is on the project activities and the timeline of your activities. So in here, you can write the different activities that you'll have throughout the project, and then there are different informations that we want to know regarding this. So the name of your activity, also what type of activity it is. So, for example, the type of activity here could be that you want to conduct research, and then the location will be, so if we go again with Uganda and Spain, then we can say that the location, so the research will be conducted in both Spain and Uganda. And then you can, for example, if you're working in a specific region, you can also mention the specific region. When are you going to conduct this activity? So it might be, for example, in the first 3 or the first 4 months of your project, and the expected outcomes of this activity, for example, a report. So here the activities can really take many different forms. We don't have an exhaustive list, so this can really be up to what is relevant for the objectives of your project. So we don't have a list of activities that you can choose from. This is really any activity that relates to your policy and advocacy goals and to the different focus areas. So you can also be creative here and decide to implement activities that make sense to you, that make sense to the goals of your project and to your organizations. And then, so this is in terms of the project itself. And then we have a part in which we're asking for the capacity of the different organizations implementing the program, the project. So as you might know, we're not asking for a specific experience from the different organizations. They also don't have to exist for a certain period of time. They can also be quite new organizations, like they can, so they can be quite young organizations. That's completely fine. We have one requirement, which is that the coordinator should have prior experience working on at least one collaborative project. So not necessarily leading in a consortium or leading on a collaborative project, but have experience working with another organization on a project. So that's the only requirement that we're asking for. And we're asking, so what's the capacity of your organization to carry on this project? So we're not asking for a lot of experience or other requirements. but we do want to see that your organization does have the capacity to carry on this project until the end of the grant period. So this is also something, so you can include who is going to be involved in the project, which will also have to be reflected in the budget, which we'll discuss later, because anyone who works in the project should be paid and should thus be reflected in the project. And then you have the same question for, so if you have 1 collaborator, 2 collaborators, or 3 collaborators, since you can be 2 to 4 organizations. And the coordinator and the first collaborator are mandatory. And then if you don't have more, you can leave this blank. And then also maybe important to mention is that all the questions that have a red star are mandatory questions. And then you have a question on monitoring and evaluation. So for monitoring and evaluation, so you'll have to write different things. The first one are the key performance indicators. So for here, so key performance indicators are really what help measure your progress against your objectives. And here we're really asking you to add key performance indicators that make sense to you. So that makes sense to your organization and to your project. Some examples might be, for example, if you want to measure stakeholder engagement, the number of policymakers that are engaged, or the numbers of trainings that you conducted, or the numbers of individuals that you trained in a specific training, or, for example, the number of materials that you produced and that you disseminated. But it can take many different forms. So this is really, you can really choose indicators that make sense to you. And also, for example, so to illustrate this, if you organize an event and for your event, you believe it doesn't make sense to calculate the number of participants who are coming to the event because you think that other indicators are more relevant. And then in some contexts, it's also sometimes hard to know how many participants will come. People might also cancel last minute, depending on the context. You can also choose another indicator that you think makes more sense to you. So this is also important to note. And then also, we also encourage to rather put low estimates rather than higher estimates. We know that we all tend to overpromise when we apply to different projects. And in here, we were really asking not to do this. So you don't necessarily have to put high numbers. You can really write what you think is realistic and achievable for your project and for the different activities that you have. So this is in terms of the key performance indicators or the KPIs. And then in terms of the methods that you will use in order to collect data, this can also take many forms. So you can collect data, for example, by doing surveys, or if you organize an event, it can also be an attendance list, or if you do a social media campaign, or like an online campaign of any sort, it can be media analytics. You can also conduct interviews. You can also have reports. You can also have feedback forms. So the methods for data collection are also quite broad, and you can also choose what makes the most sense to you. You don't have to always use quantitative methods. If you think that qualitative methods make more sense for your project, then please also indicate that you rather choose qualitative methods. Of course, we do need to have some sort of some numbers, because we also need to be able to quantitatively measure and evaluate the project and its advancement, but it doesn't have to only be numbers. So you can also really focus on qualitative methods if you think that this makes more sense for your project. This is completely fine. So for example, if you organize an event and you think counting the number of people who attended the event is not the most relevant indicator, another indicator could also be, for example, what people learned during the event. So this is also something, or you can, for example, conduct interviews with the participants who came. So it doesn't always only have to be quantitative. You can also do something that you think makes the most sense in order for your project so to reach its objectives. And then, so how information will be used to keep the project on track. So for this, are you going to use evaluation firms, do check-ins within your consortium, organize internal assessments, and so on. And then here, if you click on the I, so on information, you'll also see what KPIs or key performance indicators are. So you also have a bit more information on this, and then on the number of characters that you can use. And then in terms of the risks, so here we're asking you to list 3 to 5 risks that that you think might occur and might impact your project. So you also have here an information, the grid of the likelihood of the risk occurring, and so what each what low, medium, and high mean. So you can also write what impact this risk would have on the project and what mitigation measures you will put in place. And then we also have an information here with more information. And here you can also really indicate risks that are internal and external. You don't only have to focus on external factors, like, for example, political factors or others. It can also be internal to your consortium. For example, miscommunication, power dynamics within a consortium. So this is really important to consider as well. This is also something that we will pay attention to when reviewing the applications, because we also want to make sure that you're aware of potential risks that may arise within your consortium that are due to the collaboration itself. So you can list 3 to 5. And this is the end of the narrative report, the narrative application template. So as you see, it's not extremely long, and the answers also don't have to be very long. We're really asking you to be concise, to be to the point, so to be clear, basically, on what your project is about. And we can start sharing the slides again. For that, I'll stop sharing my screen. So a few points to pay attention to when you apply. One of them is that you make sure to meet the hard and soft eligibility criteria. So for the hard eligibility criteria, so this is what we mentioned with being youth-led, with being formal, and so on. So everything is also available on the website. And then for the soft criteria, so there are 3 that are also available and explained in the funding manual. So one is that you're passionate and you're eager to learn and link with other organizations from Africa and Europe, so to exchange and learn of your activities. The second one is that you're eager to participate in a genuine cross-continental partnership with all organizations contributing, learning, and sharing insights from the collaborative process. So really make this a collaborative process. And the third one, you're committed to recognizing and addressing potential power dynamics. This means ensuring fair participation and joint decision-making and creating a balanced partnership where every voice carries weight. Those, so for the hard criteria, this is something that we will already check before reviewing your application to see if you're eligible. For the soft eligibility criteria, this is something that should appear throughout your application, because if this is not met, the application will also not be considered eligible. So also important to take into consideration. And then, of course, demonstrate how your project aligns with the focus areas of the grant. So this is what we discussed earlier. There are also clear questions on this. So you can also compare this with the funding manual and see and use the funding manual to help you answer those questions. Pay attention to compulsory fields, so where you have the red stars and the character count limit. Upload all required documents, so your registration documents, any other policies that are asked. Make sure everything is properly filled and uploaded before submitting your application. Important to note, once your application is submitted, you won't be able to edit it. So also pay attention to this before you submit your application. And then these are some questions you can ask yourself before submitting your application. You might already be familiar with the SMART method. So to make sure that your application is specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. So specific, so you can ask yourself, is the proposal clear about what you want to achieve? Who it targets? Does it include all necessary information? Are the answers easy to understand for people outside of your consortium? So really make sure that that it's easy for the reviewers to understand what your project is about, and that you don't omit any information that would be important for us to know. What you can do for this is, for example, peer review and asking someone outside of your organization or from your organization, but who is not involved in the project, to read the application or to read some of the questions to see whether it's clear for them. This is one way to do it. Measurable. So can you clearly see what success looks like and track progress? So this is also in the monitoring and evaluation question, but this is also something that can be a bit more qualitative if you don't only want to use quantitative data or methods. Achievable. So are the activities realistic and doable within your time? So the 12 months, the budget, the 50,000 euros, and the capacity of your organizations. So this is important again, like please don't overpromise in the application. Really write activities or an activity plan and an application that is realistic and doable within the time, budget, and capacity. Relevant. So is my project proposal relevant to the objective and aligned with the focus areas of the grant? Does it address real needs for both continents? So this is also what we were discussing earlier. And then time-bound, are timelines and milestones clear and realistic? So are your activities all within the 12 months? Is everything realistic and doable? So this is one method you can use. The slides will also be shared afterwards. You can also use another method if you want to. And yes, so that's it for the narrative application template. And now we'll go into the budget template. So for the budget template, there are a few points to pay attention to. The first one is you really have to use the official budget template that you can find on the Cooperation Grants webpage. So you can download it and fill in your budget template in there. We don't have strict caps on any of the budget categories. So not only salaries and overheads actually, but on any of the budget categories, but just make sure that all the costs are reasonable and justified, and also that all of them relate to your narrative template. So we will check that each of the costs is also somehow justified and also really and also visible in the narrative template, so related to all of the activities that you're going to implement. And then also important to consider that the coordinating organization will most probably have a bit more admin work and a bit more work in general. So this might also add to the human resources costs of the coordinating organization. Also important to note, some budget cost categories are optional. You don't need to fill in all budget cost categories. The only ones that are mandatory are the human resources, capacity development, and travels, which I'll explain. You need to budget at least 5% for capacity building of your own organization. So 5% of the 50,000 euros need to be dedicated to some trainings that, or another way to do, to build the capacity of your organization. So this is also very important, and it has to be related to your project, but it's really to build the capacity of your organization. So let's say that your project is to do an online campaign on a certain topic. Maybe you'll want your organization to follow a training on strategic communication, or like how to use digital tools, and so on. So 5% needs to be dedicated for capacity building of your own organization. And then, as mentioned earlier, if your application is selected, you'll participate in 2 in-person events that will take place. So one will be a kickoff event that will take place most likely at the end of June, but to be confirmed. This is budgeted. This is covered by us, so you don't need to budget for any of this. And there will be another event that will most probably take place in November or December 2026. And that will need to be visible in your budget. So this is an event that will gather all of the organizations that are part of the program in order to connect, to link, to learn from each other for a few days, and will take place in one of the 12 African countries. We don't know where it will be yet. So we're asking you to do a high average, so to select the most expensive option. And then if you over budget and you have extra budget that is left, you will be able to use it for other activities. So what you can do, you can use, for example, a flight comparative website, and then check how much it costs from your country to each of the 12 African focused countries to fly. Select the most expensive option and choose this in the select this and put this in your budget, and explain it, justify it in the remarks narrative section, which I'll show in a second. And then, of course, all expenses must be directly linked to the project activity. So that's what I was explaining before. So make sure that the narrative template and the work plan really relate to the budget. So now I'll share my screen and go over the budget template. So this is how the budget looks like once you download it. So you see that there are different budget categories. Here there are some examples that you will need to remove. So just delete, because it's just to show some examples of how this could look like. And then we have different categories, which are also explained below. So you can also have a look at this before starting to fill in your budget. So first one is the staff costs or human resources costs, and then subcontracting. So this relates to, for example, experts, trainers, but also, for example, if you rent a venue, if there's catering or something else, goods and materials. So for example, if you run an event or a workshop or something else, maybe you'll need to print some materials or purchase other goods. And then we have travel, accommodation, subsistence. So this relates to, first of all, you'll have to budget for the Link and Learn event here. And you already have some pre-prepared budget lines that you can use. And then you can also include any other travels that you may have in the context of your project. Capacity development, this relates to the 5%. So what type of training your organization wants to follow. If you don't know yet, this is also fine. You can also be generic. You can also write a general budget line and then write in the remarks section that this will still be decided because your needs might change or because you don't know what type of training you want to follow yet. This is completely fine. And then the overheads, so general operational costs, like, for example, Wi-Fi or renting the office or other. So except from staff costs, travel, and capacity development, the other budget categories are optional. And then I will show you, so this is an example of how a budget could look like. The numbers are random, so I really just did this as an example to show you how it could look like, but it doesn't have to look like that. It can look differently. The numbers are random, so also don't necessarily pay attention to this. So here you can write the name of the different organizations, the countries in which the project will be implemented, the different currencies that you use in your budget template, and then the name of your project. In here, so you have staff costs. So in the staff costs, you can always write to make it it's always good to make sure that the budget lines are clear for the reviewers. So to be as specific as possible. So here you can write the name of the organization this cost is for, the role that this person will have or these people will have, and the full-time equivalent. So the full-time equivalent doesn't necessarily mean one person. So in this case, it doesn't necessarily mean one person working part-time. It could also be two people working 25%. So it's just like to know what is the equivalent of a full-time in this budget line. And then you'll write so what type of cost estimation this is. So you can select different categories. In here, when it's a salary, it can be month, it can be days, depending on how your organization works, and then how much it costs. So here it's 900 per month, and then the number of items, we say 12 months, and then this will be automatically calculated. You can write the exchange rate, so €2, and then the calculation to euros will be made automatically. And then really important to use the remarks and narrative section to ensure that it's clear for us. It's better to use it too much than not enough to make sure that your budget is clear. So then you can go ahead and continue with this. And also important, so there is no cap on staff costs, but we also want to see that they are actually working on activities and that the costs are linked to the specific activities. So this is what you can do. And then you have subcontracting. So for example, let's say that you're organizing an event. If you're organizing an event, then maybe in all implementing countries, so in Tunis, Tunisia, Kampala, Uganda, and Lisbon, Portugal, then you would, so you're organizing local events in the 3 different locations. So you would write again the name of your organization, so we know what this refers to, the location, and then the activity this is for, and then select. So here this would be subcontracting. And then here it's for a trainer. So let's say that you pay your trainer in days, but it could also be a unit, for example, depending on how your organization works. And then again, you can write, so the number of days they work for, the currency, the exchange rate to euros. For this, you can use the website of the European Commission, which is also available in the funding manual. And then an explanation of what the trainer will actually do and what this costs incurs. And then, for example, if you are hiring sign language interpreters, this is also, so like for the trainer, so you would write the name of the organization, the location, and then the type of cost. So in this case, sign language interpreter for this specific event. And then for the number of days you hire them, for the costs. This budget line could also be called, for example, accessibility budget. It doesn't necessarily have to be that specific if you don't know how this will be used yet, because this will probably also depend on the need of your participants. And then there is a budget category, so goods and materials. So this is the same again. So try to be to really relate each budget line to the narrative template. And then for travel, accommodation, subsistence, so this is what I was explaining with the Link and Learn event. So you can budget for the travels, the accommodation, subsistence costs, and then other expenses you might have, for example, visa, vaccines, and so on. And then for capacity development, you can either be specific. So here, for example, I wrote, all organizations will follow an online 3-day training on strategic communication. But if you don't know yet, you can also just divide this budget between the 3 organizations and put name of the organization, capacity building budget, and then do this for each of the organizations. This is also fine. For overheads here, I didn't indicate anything, but you can, of course, also indicate in case you have any indirect. There are overhead costs. And then you have the tab budget summary, which will be automatically calculated. So you don't need to input anything here. And then you can also see, so where your budget is at. So this is how it could look like, that you would have 6% allocated to capacity development, and then the other categories. So once again, this is not how a budget needs to look like. It's just a way it could look like. I'll stop sharing my screen now, and then we can go back to the slides. So again here, some important points to keep in mind, as mentioned. So remember to justify all your costs. So there's a remarks narrative section, and it's really important for us to see that there are short but strong justifications in the remarks column to understand what each cost is about. use clear budget lines. So instead of just policy officer salary, we also need to know which organization this is for and also how much they will work. So here, for example, 0.5. So this is like a part-time job. So for a policy officer who will work, for example, for 12 months, it can also be less. This is just an example. So make sure that the budget is easy to understand and has a consistent language across the entire application. Only include eligible expenses. In the funding manual, you'll have an overview of what expenses are eligible or not. So really important to check this. And then make sure that your budget is exactly 50,000 euros. So it cannot go below or exceeded. It shouldn't even be €1 below or €1 above, because it really has to be 50,000 euros. So make sure that it matches this amount. And then, of course, try to give yourself time to check your budget and the calculations to see if everything is correct. So this is it for the templates. If you have questions, we'll have a Q&A session after. So you'll also be able to ask any questions you may have during that time. And now just some information on the timeline and the next steps. So in terms of the next steps, so make sure that you have a consortium. So as you know, you need to apply with minimum 2 organizations and maximum 4, with representation from at least 1 African and 1 European organization. So make sure that you have a consortium. If you don't have a consortium yet, we also have a form that you can fill out to join a database of interested organizations that want to apply for cooperation grants. So you can also join the database and contact organizations. And then you can write your joint project proposal, because as mentioned, this is a collaborative process. So there will be indeed a coordinator in each consortium, but the project proposal needs to be written together. You can register to the platform. So you also have extensive explanation on the website on how to do this and how to navigate the platform. So this is the one I showed you, where you'll find the narrative application template. And then the deadline, make sure that you meet it so that you submit before 12 February. I believe it's a Thursday at 1 p.m. Central European time. Please make sure that you don't submit your project proposal after that. We will update the status of your proposal on the ONCRIP portal. I believe you will also receive emails in your inboxes, but the status will also be on the ONCRIP portal, and we will contact you by May, maybe April, but most probably, yes, April or May. And we ask you that please, between the 12th of February and May, you do not reach out to us, because we will be reviewing the applications. So if you didn't receive any news, it means it's coming. And of course, if you didn't receive any news by June, then you can also contact us to see if there has been any oversight. So this is it for the explanation on how to navigate the different templates. I hope this was clear. This session is also recorded and will be published on the website. So you can also go back to it while you're writing your application. And now we will have a Q&A session. So I'll pass on to Yule to facilitate this. Thank you very much, everyone.
Hello, thank you so much, Pauline. Thank you everyone who already sent some questions into the chat as well. I just wanted to shortly explain how we will do the Q&A session. So first I will take 3 people to speak. So I already see Pedro, for example, raised their hand. So then we can take 3 people like this, and then Pauline will answer, and then we will take 3 questions from the chat. For now, I know there is a lot of questions around eligibility, especially the youth-led aspect, and also how to find a partner organization. And I can understand, especially understanding if your organization is youth-led or not can be sometimes a bit confusing. And also finding a partner organization, a bit of a longer process. However, because this webinar was